Well, hello and welcome. I'm very excited that you're able to join us for this week's panel conversation. My name is Matt Fulton, and I'm the Vice President of National Engagement for an engagement company called Platform. Today, we've got just a great panel, and I'm excited for them to share their perspectives on the topic of maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. You know, we're going to be talking about the challenges that communities are facing in just keeping connected with their residents during this pandemic and really just challenging time in all sorts of different respects. And the intent of these panel conversations is really to gather perspectives from local professionals in local government, and then to be able to share these conversations with others that are facing the same challenges. Here's the format for the conversation today. We'll take a few moments for each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their backgrounds. I'll kick off the conversation with the questions that we will be asking, trying to draw out what the communities are doing to keep their residents connected and other important community issues that they're confronting. And then during the second half, or towards the end, we will allow some time for the panelists to ask each other questions or just to kind of prompt any other questions that come up during the course of our conversation. If that sounds okay, we will go ahead and get underway. Our first panelist is Gina Hawkins, who is the Chief of Police in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She's been the chief since 2017, although she's been in law enforcement for over 30 years. Including being with several departments in Georgia. She's got a Master's of Science in Management from Johns Hopkins University and is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Gina, what I found really impressive is that you were chosen to be a delegate in the 23rd Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange, where you had the opportunity to travel internationally to Israel to actually study and evaluate the Israeli police force. That is just really, must have been a really impressive experience that you had.
Very much so.
Chief Hawkins also serves as the National Treasurer for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and really appreciate, Chief, you spending some time with us. If you would want to add just a few things to that biography, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me and being a part of this panel to get input. Yes, I have actually been doing this over 32 years now. Besides, I was been in Fayetteville since 2017, but most of my law enforcement experience did come from the Atlanta metropolitan area. I also, in 2020, was asked and chosen to be one of the commissioners for the law enforcement in the commission of the Presidential Commission of Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice. And that was a heavy lift to try to cipher through last year, but just very humble just to be able to serve right now. So thank you for having me.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here. Our second panelist is Marcia Hampton, who has served as city manager in Douglasville, Georgia since 2015, although she's been with the city since 2003. Marcia is a recognized credentialed manager and a leader in our profession. She was named as one of the top 10 young professionals in Douglas County and was also nominated as one of the top 10 women in government by the League of Women in Government. And that's just a very impressive recognition to receive. She's active on numerous committees and advisory groups at the state level, focused on legislative issues, workforce priorities, and just generally things that are impacting on local governments. She's also a member of the Georgia City County Managers Association and serves on their executive committee as the executive vice president, so providing leadership within the state. The other thing that's impressive about Marcia is she is a veteran of the United States Navy. Marcia, I would really appreciate just hearing a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the introduction. One thing I would add is just this month, actually, I was installed as the president of the Georgia City County Managers Association for the next 2 years. So it's definitely an honor and a privilege to serve. I'm also a part of the Georgia Municipal Association's benefits trust system as well, which serves as a insurance pool and risk management pool for the state. So we're entrusted with about, at this point, we've reached over $2.3 billion in assets for our members. It's just as the chief has mentioned, it's an honor to be able to serve. I serve in a community that demographics have changed over the last 5 years. So I'm one of just a few executive staff that are minority, including my chief and the mayor. We all serve as the first African Americans in our positions, but we've been with our community for a long time. So we're just happy to be able to serve. That's
great. That's a very impressive resume. Congratulations on becoming president of the state association, and good luck with your tenure. That's an important responsibility for the profession. Our third panelist is Ryan Waller. Ryan is currently the city manager of Indianola, Iowa, a full service community. Is located actually in the Des Moines area. It's home to Simpson College, a private liberal arts college, and also the community is recognized as a major tourist area. The acclaimed Des Moines Metro Opera and the National Balloon Classic, which is one of the nation's longest running premier hot air ballooning events, which is really cool. Ryan's been in the profession for almost 20 years and is a passionate philanthropist, volunteering many countless of hours. One of the things that I've really been impressed with as I've gotten to know Ryan a little bit is his service on the board of directors for a group called the Summer Foundation. This is a not-for-profit group that provides college and university scholarships to deserving high school seniors who have experienced the death of a parent, and it's some sources of help for helping them in a move on to a college or university setting. That's just as an outstanding way to spend your time, Ryan. So congratulations on that. I would welcome Ryan just for you to just share a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the invite, and I'm certainly honored to serve alongside some other public servants here. I've been in, like you said, I've been in local government about 20 years, and most of my career was spent in the northern suburbs of Illinois. I've worked with some great professionals throughout those 20 years, and just very excited to be here. I think public service is a passion. It's a calling for many of us. And the time on the Summer Foundation board is very near and dear to my heart. And in my capacity here, I serve on a number of local boards, Warren County Child Abuse Prevention Council, the local YMCA board. So really, I think echo what the other panelists had talked about. It's an honor to serve.
That's great, Ryan, and just congratulations on that work. It sounds like you spent a lot of time in the community and really give back to the community. So thanks for that, and thanks for certainly being here. Well, let's move on to the topic. We're going to be talking about maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. You know, all of our communities are going through COVID-19 and the pandemic, along with all sorts of other things that are disrupting the community. And just given the unsettled environment that we're all experiencing, it just becomes more important than ever to try to figure out ways to connect with residents who are also trying to figure out their path through this pandemic period. Because everybody's life is disrupted, needs, expectations, priorities have all been disrupted as well. And so engagement allows you the opportunity to get a current understanding as to where people's heads are, what their needs are, where public service delivery issues can be adjusted. It's presenting all sorts of challenges, not only to the community, but to the organization. And so the idea today is to just gather information from our panelists on how their communities are actually responding to the pandemic and dealing with engagement. One way to start this conversation is really kind of just taking a look at the problem. Our research has actually shown that about 80% of adults in America have actually never even been to a city council meeting. So as you think about engagement, even in the best of times, it's always been a challenge and difficult. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think some of them are just we're busy. The schedules for getting engagement at a local level becomes its own barrier because of the timing of our meetings. And so it's just always been a challenge. And now you throw on top of that a pandemic where everybody is working remotely, organizations are working remotely, all of the meetings are being held virtually. It just becomes a really important time when communities need to become better listeners, be transparent and accountable, and really find ways to connect better with their residents on getting to the solutions that will help people still feel a sense of community, which is really one of the most important things a person wants to have. So there are three questions we want to discuss today. The first one is, how has your communications and engagement strategy evolved since the beginning of the pandemic? The second is, how does resident engagement influence your success in maintaining a sense of community? And then finally, which tools do you currently use to measure feedback from a resident's perspective during these challenging times? So if you don't mind, let's just kick into that conversation. Marcia, could you share how your communication and engagement strategy has evolved in Douglasville since the beginning of the pandemic?
We had pretty much for the past few years had already adopted a policy of kind of meeting our residents where they are. We do have several older parts of our community that do not have technology equipment and resources like many other places. So we fortunately were already accustomed to going out. The challenge presented itself to, okay, now that you're going out, how do you not expose employees, as well as how do you not expose the citizens? So we have been able to just divvy up our resources, and many of our employees who would have possibly been laid off or furloughed at the beginning of the pandemic, for instance, in our Parks and Recreation Department, and allowed them to become ambassadors to go out to communicate in a safe, socially distanced space to many of our areas where technology is lacking. So meeting in small groups and community rooms where we can be away from individuals, giving them the important information that they needed to know about healthcare issues and safety issues, and what services either from the city would either be limited, cut out altogether, or how we were doing those services differently. And for those residents and citizens who did have the means of technology, we just went all hands on deck with social media, making certain that individuals knew, okay, this is how we are now communicating. This is a change in our council meetings. We only went virtual 100% in our council meetings only for the first 3 weeks. We've been hybrid ever since. So giving residents a choice and limiting those who can come to the council meetings to make certain that we're all socially distanced and being safe. So far, everything has worked in a good manner. We've had very slight issues in certain areas, maybe court and sanitation, but so far I think we have possibly in some ways reached more residents than we possibly would have ever done even during normal times.
Has the role of your city council evolved with this during the pandemic in terms of their connection with the community?
I think in Douglasville, we're fairly fortunate because we are a fairly smaller community with only 35,000 residents. So we have a very hands-on group of elected officials. If I were to say it has changed much, it's just gotten them even more engaged than they already were. We have a very engaged group of elected officials who are boots on the ground groups. They have their ear to the ground. They know what's happening in the community. They're very responsive to the community's needs. So I think that it has allowed them to become even more engaged and informed and better educators of policies and services that we provide to our constituents. Okay,
that's great. Ryan, how has Indianola's communication and engagement strategy evolved since the start of the pandemic?
I think I'd have to echo a lot of what Marcia said. Really, social media, the Zoom platform has given us a much larger reach. At the time of the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, we were rolling out live stream. We broadcast our city council meetings on the cable, but we wanted to further that reach and make it accessible to those that may not use your traditional cable utilities. There's a lot more internet-based platforms, and so streaming through YouTube, we were piloting a couple different functions. So when the pandemic really hit, we went full on YouTube, and then so YouTube live stream and then Zoom. Matt, before we officially started the panel, we were talking about how, some of the state restrictions vary. We've been fortunate where we really there's been shutdowns across Iowa, but from a municipal standpoint, we've been able to keep that in-person presence in city council, in the city council chambers. We've got enough space where we can socially distance. We have done the hybrid approach. So our elected officials have been here. They've taken advantage of that. We've seen our viewership go up. And we've seen a lot more transition to digital. We put out a quarterly community news magazine, programs and things like that. And we had to stop publishing it hard copy and start sending it out digitally. And so what we found was that the readership was actually increasing. So a lot more digital, a lot more social media, just giving residents the opportunity to, as Marcia said, you kind of meet them where they're at. If they feel more comfortable coming in, or if they prefer to watch at home via live stream or communicate via the Zoom, we've been doing that. We talk about the 4 C's at the city: communication, collaboration, community engagement, and customer service. And so we were living and breathing all those as we head into the pandemic. So really putting the emphasis on the communication and the engagement. Social media for communicating out activities and things like that has just been huge for us anyway. And our sister agency has been rolling out community-wide fiber. So the access to that technology has been there. We're not as large as Marcia's community, but we've got about 16,000 residents here. So the reach is a little bit larger for us.
Brian, have you evolved or modified some of the roles, like in Douglasville, some of the activities or responsibilities that your staff have typically done in the past during this last year? Yes and no. We've been fortunate because we've not had to do any furloughs. We operate with a lean crew anyway, with all our departments. If anything, what's happened is, we shut down the library, we shut down our activity center, we had to shut down the pool, but through empowerment and our staff understanding the mission of customer service, we've got creative with our service delivery. So while the seniors may not come in for a yoga class or a country line dancing class at the activity center, we're still delivering that service virtually. Okay, thank you. Chief Hawkins, how has Fayetteville's communication and engagement strategy evolved since the start of the pandemic?
So I'll share, as a police department, the engagement is crucial for us in law enforcement, because that is what's needed. That's what's been needed continuously, but even more now, because as the pandemic came about, so did civil unrest. So we had the opportunity to double down on a lot of things that we were already doing well. So we play a big role with community engagement by having community watch meetings and going to schools and a whole lot of different things that literally had to stop. But after it stopped, we had to really evaluate how are we going to continue to afford the information that we shared as a police department to educate the community, which is kind of crucial, which is almost like what you started off talking about, the engagement of the community. We believe that empowering the community to understand not just what the government does, but what law enforcement does makes everyone better, makes everyone have a participating input on how do you want law enforcement or the city, how do you want your city to be run? So when it stopped initially, we had to try to figure out, how to continue this on. And then we had the other issue as well of the digital divide, the individuals that did not have internet communication. How do we continue to get them information in this pandemic? Most of the things that we were able to transition to, it took trial and error. It took innovation of figuring out how to create those meetings in a Zoom platform, how to try to invite anyone who did not have access to a computer or where to get that resource. Training them onto how to log on to the internet was another component. We have a huge social media. My police department in the city has a huge social media followers that are just not the city. Fayetteville has the largest Army base in the nation, Fort Bragg. So a lot of family members are connected to Fayetteville because their family are here serving. So throughout the nation, we have a lot of followers on our Facebook page that we feed not just information as far as what we wanted, but educational information as well. So another thing we did, so we started doing Zoom. We also have like a community, a citizens police academy where we invite people to come. We started practicing early on techniques to try to keep the community safe. Just in case someone wanted to come in the building, we had to figure out how, one, we made it mandatory, you just couldn't come in. That was before it was popular to put on the mask. We had it on very early. We had things to protect ourselves very early to make sure we can do dual things, a citizen police academy or our meetings online or in a room large enough that we can social distance. So we've been doing that a great deal. We have another thing where we are in the community. We had to shut down being engaged and having community meetings. But we saw an opportunity where we would have what we call Operation Ceasefire Movie Night. And everyone would come on lawn chairs and do that. So what we did was took advantage of, okay, we can't do that because we're too close. And we end up having to get a bigger screen, a bigger movie screen to have the same Operation Ceasefire Movie Night, but in a drive-through setting. So it was like going through a drive-in, and we still invited the community to get engaged, still masked up, and still provided education. So it just involved a lot of innovation, things thinking outside the box and making sure everyone participated. So it's a lot of things that we've been doing, but just trying to take care of the first priority was keeping the community safe and healthy is a major priority.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Chief Hawkins, just because law enforcement is such a critical service in every community, if you were to recommend the one thing that you did in shifting your engagement and communication strategy to other law enforcement departments, what would that one big success thing be for you?
Being extremely proactive and researching and looking nationally or internationally of what's going on. For example, when COVID first started coming in January, February, and the real threat was there of getting ill. When my department, when I looked at it, started doing research proactively and said we couldn't access masks. Everyone knew that because we were trying to get it to major cities like New York. So what we did was we started buying material, and we literally started physically making masks in our department. Oddly enough, other department heads in the city and other city people, even in the department, said, "Why are we doing this? It's not that serious." But it was based off of looking internationally, what can we do to prevent getting impacted? So what I would recommend is to always continuously looking for other cities that are doing, or other governmental entities, and doing research ahead of time. Don't get stagnant in this. I know how to do it. This is how we've always done it, and we'll be okay. Always be proactive in innovation and empowering your staff, empowering input for welcoming other ideas. So.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and thanks. I mean, it really endorses what we're trying to do through these panel conversations, is just help other communities appreciate what have been the successes in communities around the country on dealing with engagement. So thank you very much for those comments. Let's move on to the second question. And Ryan, I'd like to start with you. Ryan, how does engagement play into your success in maintaining a sense of community in Indianola?
Oh, I think that's huge. It's for us. Without that engagement, we don't know what kind of service delivery our community is wanting. So we were fortunate because right before the pandemic hit, we'd gone through a master plan update, which involved a very significant public engagement campaign. The community survey had greater than 10% participation. So a lot of the data that we were getting from there was statistically significant. I mean, 10% was outstanding. So from that point on, I mean, we're going through a couple facility projects right now, and as part of the evaluation of the consultants, it was what is your expertise and what are your tools that you're deploying to ensure that we're engaging the community to solicit their feedback, especially during this pandemic environment that we're in. But without the engagement of the community, without knowing where the community stands on a number of things, there's really no way you know that you're delivering the right type of customer service.
Brian, you mentioned earlier about that a lot of your virtual work and your digital connections have actually increased. Have you noticed with your capital project meetings or those kind of interactions, has that public participation increased as well? We've had a lot of good participation from the public. I think what I'm proud of our organization for doing is the advanced communication that we do. Chief Hawkins talked, in her last answer, talked about the proactiveness of and just preparation. And I think that holds true for communication. So as we've been working on different projects, the one that I just mentioned, where we're hiring a consultant to help us engage the community on these facilities, we've been talking about that for 2 years. So for the last 2 years, we've been communicating out to the community proactively what we're doing, why we're doing it, the need, and just being as transparent as possible. Yeah, so the whole topic, as Chief Hawkins mentioned, about just being proactive and paying attention becomes an important part of that. That's right. I mean, that's how you're building trust when you're communicating. I was fortunate to be a part of an SEI Senior Executive Institute program through ICMA about 9 years ago now. And one of the things that they talked about was some examples of just bond referendum and what was attributed to what were successful bond referendums and what weren't. And it was always the ones that would communicate out, had a high level of trust, communicating out, this is what we're going to do, and then following through on saying, we said we were going to do this, this is what we've done, and here's the proof. So really establishing that, communicate upfront, communicate during, and communicating after, that builds a trust, that builds a respect, and it shows the community that we're prepared. Like Chief Hawkins said, we were monitoring the pandemic January and February. We had plans in place when it really hit our community, and we were able to pull the trigger and start communicating out what we were doing, why we were doing it. And the community has been very, very complimentary of just how organized and prepared we were. Yeah, okay, thank you. Gina, how has engagement influenced Fayetteville's success in maintaining its sense of community?
I think although we're talking about COVID and social distancing, I think because of the civil unrest and where we are, not just in June, where we are now, there has been an increase in communications with the city. My city leaders, we had a special meeting just last night because of a heightened issue regarding a mural of Black Lives Matter or Black Lives Do Matter mural that was taken up prematurely or not communicated out according to what they expected. We are having a lot of communications that stem from where we are in society, but that engagement is continuous as far as, because we're in a pandemic, we have half of it. So the city is shut down for people coming in to do like public hearings. They can come in, but it's not open to the public. So we have to have a lot of different platforms available for them to watch or listen or even rewatch. And that's just not just for the city leaders, that's for the police department as well. How we push out a lot of information. Also, it works, but it's a double-edged sword, because now that people are at home, they think there's an even more issue with human trafficking or aggravated assaults or violence, which has been a rise, but they think it's unusually more than it's just been rising up. You're now aware of it because you're home and able to watch it through our our networks, because we're pushing out information because we think it's important for you to know what's going on in a community. But that means more questions are coming out, which is a good thing, but It's not sadly, it's not unusual, but it's a good thing. So we see results because we're going to keep pushing it out. They're going to keep getting calls to say, well, what's going on here? But it's part of the engagement. It's part of the education. It's part of no, let me explain this to you, of what's going on. Let me share with you how to get things done and how to get engaged and what new things are you looking for. So I think it's been a good opportunity to not only meet more people who weren't engaged in the past, but also to teach them, hey, these are our ways that we're engaged. If you can offer or you think other ways, we're open to that. So
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. You mentioned it earlier, but communities have just been impacted not only by COVID, but all of the community unrest that's happened over the course of the last year. And of course, with your responsibilities in law enforcement, I'm kind of interested whether or not has Fayetteville, the police department, and maybe all other departments integrated into a plan to help residents feel more part of the community. Also, could you just add a little bit more to kind of the connectedness that residents are now feeling based on some of your proactive efforts?
Yeah, we are definitely open, and part of that openness is to make sure our websites and the city's website also for each department has a drill down of transparency, accessibility of data and information. So whether it be streets department might have a drill down of how we're progressing in that aspect. The police department specifically, we are open to not just all of our data, our crime incidences. You can search and research and pull that information for yourself, but we'll teach you how to do that as well. It's a transparency to say you can learn, we'll teach you how to learn. This is your information. Truly, it is your information to have. And it gears us and how we serve and where we go in different areas in the community for them to have a better understanding of that impact. Our parks department, our parks and recs department might have in their part of the website more information on how to get engaged and make decisions and things, progression of projects that are going on. So I think it's very informative in that aspect. If I answered your question, I think I might have veered off a little bit.
No, that's really great. As a former city manager, you're describing exactly what I think residents need in terms of transparency and accountability, and just being the feeling of being connected to the community is it's kind of like knowing that you have access to information that is impacting your daily lives. And it sounds like you're leading a department and through your proactive efforts, really helping Fayetteville move forward.
Teaching others to teach others, to say, don't ever be afraid to ask a question. Don't ever be afraid to pick up the phone, to ask, I don't know. And it's not just one person should have that information. We should spread this across many networks. Example, we have, it's called Fayettevilles, where you can drive around for code enforcement and any citizen can identify, it's an app, identify a problem or issue to try to correct, and it feeds it to code enforcement or whatever department that needs to fix that issue. We participate in that aspect as well. When we see it as law enforcement or any employee sees something, we can enter in that app and not be a citizen, and it directs another department to try to resolve problems within the city.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Marcia, how do you think engagement influences your sense of community in Douglasville?
Well, it's a key component that I believe in, as was said by both panelists, that keeps us making certain that we're, one, delivering the right level of service, and two, that we're just meeting the needs of our constituents. We are a highly engaged community, from law enforcement all the way down to our elected officials, as I mentioned. We do a lot of planning. We really look at it as an effort that the elected officials typically don't set any policy that hasn't been vetted by the constituents. So we don't do policy first and then try it out in the community. We've learned too many lessons from why that doesn't work. So anything that you can do, whether it's a capital project, whether it's how to engage the constituents in the midst of a pandemic, all the way down to how to better provide services to what they need, we are asking the citizens for feedback. And we take it all as good. even sometimes when it doesn't relate to us and maybe they're getting us confused with the county, but we take that as well, because oftentimes that helps us. So we are 100% about engagement in the community.
Does your community have an active strategic planning process, and how does engagement play into that for allowing residents to kind of give their input on vetting the issues prior to creating policy? Because I think that is such a wise move.
Yeah, we do. Actually, ours is next week. So we have our planning session for 2 days next week. Our mayor and council set goals that are based upon planning studies that were completed with the community's effort. So therefore, we don't pick goals that we just randomly pick them out of the air. We take our planning studies that relate to either operational issues, planning issues within the community, capital improvement items. All of those have been vetted through the community. So therefore, we prioritize those based on citizen input and then based on our fiscal standing. So there's nothing that we don't do that's not in lockstep with what has already been vetted by the community. That's
really interesting and really great observations. It really sounds like your community is very strategically focused, and look to engagement to help make sure that you're going the right direction.
Right, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Chief Hawkins, I'd like to move on to the third question, and that is, what tools are you using in Fayetteville to help you measure feedback from a resident's perspective during the pandemic?
So, well, during the pandemic, what tools? So we typically have used surveys on our, because we're CLIA accredited, so we have to get feedback on overall issues going on within the police department. I think that the tools that I can think I'm able to measure how much participation that we've had. You know, we still continue to have not just the Citizens Police Academy. We've had forums where we're in the community, getting them out and about for our Operation Ceasefire events. We are still participating and open to engaging in the schools. When the schools, North Carolina, our schools are shut down under our order. So that does not mean that we still can't get engaged and involved. So we still have invitations to read within the schools. It's just through a Zoom format. So we're still letting people know we're open and available to anything that you present. We'll be innovative and try to, how can we accomplish, still reaching out, still engaged. We had homeless initiatives that we still try to make sure we're out there and getting the information out. So our measurement, I think, is the open right now, because we haven't had a time period to have surveys that don't conflict with the city's survey. So the city also has initiatives where they're trying to get feedback from the public as well, but we don't want to interrupt what the city's initiative is with having a police department initiative going on. But we try to work in partnership and collaboration with a lot of different things. So although we have not slowed down with the many different events that are happening, the many different Martin Luther King holiday, it's a normal event that takes place. We also take advantage because we have a hiring initiative, because we've had an impact in having the difficulty of hiring law enforcement. So we're trying to have opportunities to advertise at public forums that we're looking for officers to get started in our police department. So trying to be innovative with the community, stay connected. We are on our local radio station at least once or twice throughout a week time period, is different ones. We are very open to the media. So since we are in the southeast portion of North Carolina, we're the major city in that area. And because we're transparent, we'll take just about every interview that is requested of us. So we're open in that platform for the media, for the radio connect, and for social media. We're on just about every platform, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, pushing out, trying to get the broad spectrum. But I think one way we measure also is, although we are on, let's say, Facebook, we're the 6th largest city in North Carolina, but we have the most followers in law enforcement as a police department on our Facebook page, bigger than other agency. So we know we have engaged followers paying attention to the information we're sharing, which is a positive thing because we put public safety announcements, videos on that platform so we can continue to educate the public on different things that they need to know to keep their community safe.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Do you have a very active neighborhood-based outreach effort?
Absolutely. We have over 150 community watch groups, but that's combined neighborhood watch, but groups that gather together and share information just to keep aware. So we are very active. We have yes is the answer, but making sure we also expand it to make sure we have not just the usual suspects, which is when I say the same people who are going to come to the meetings in the past. We're trying to reach other demographics of the community, other age groups, other avenues, and other opportunities, basically. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure. Ryan, can you talk about the tools that Indianola is using to help measure feedback from your residents and businesses during the past year?
I think Chief Hawkins was talking about boots on the ground and, the neighborhood associations. I've really enjoyed this panel discussion because a lot of the things that we're talking about are things that good communities are doing anyway. And it's just you're successful in a pandemic because you have this good foundation. We solicit feedback through a variety of different ways. I mentioned the community survey as part of the comprehensive master plan update. That's one way to ensure that we're effectuating the vision. As part of that, it's not just the community surveys. We do have an active social media presence, Facebook, Twitter. We're community of 15, 16,000. So it's a large community, but it's a small community. So you can know the various stakeholder groups throughout the community, and we make it a point to go out and interact with them and maintain those relationships. It's exactly what Chief Hawkins talked about. Having those relationships, having that open line of communication is vital to sharing, but also receiving that feedback. Our elected officials are extremely accessible. The coffee shops, even though a lot of those businesses are closed right now, we still find ways to interact with those groups. When we're working on projects, we make sure we've got stakeholder involvement as part of those groups. One example is we've got an award-winning streetscape program that's going to be developed, that's going to be breaking ground here in later in the spring. And as part of that development, it wasn't just our consultants and us sitting there crafting what it was going to look like. We had the stakeholder group to give us that feedback. Are we hitting the mark? Is it going where you think it needs to? So it's the tools. I mean, from surveys, social media, email, personal touches, knowing the various user groups, stakeholder groups in the community, having good partnerships with our chamber, business owners, resident, neighborhood groups, and things like that. That's all vital.
Ryan, it seems as though, just based on what you've been saying, Indianola has a lot of community partners, and it's a very engaged community that is kind of taking advantage of all of the skill sets from all of those resources around the community.
Yeah, and we've got this Indianola Hometown Pride Committee, and one of their first efforts was to go out and kind of create a database of all those different user groups. And even before the pandemic, we had a storm roll through here in 2018. It wasn't a tornado; it was more of a microburst. But because of that list, we were able to reach out to the local Rotary group, local Lions Club, and get some assistance with helping people, cut up some trees that were down in their neighborhood and bring them to the curb so our crews could pick them up. I mean, something as simple as that. But again, as Chief Hawkins mentioned, knowing who your partners are throughout the community is so important. Having those relationships and that open dialogue is just critical.
Yeah, thank you for that. This has been just great. A lot of just great perspectives that everybody has shared. Let me just kind of summarize some of the major things that I heard. One of the things that really impressed me during this panel conversation is just how you've all emphasized the proactive nature. Chief, I really appreciated your environmental scanning of benefiting from what other communities are doing. I mean, you're all relying on community partners for ensuring that engagement is happening. You're evolving and doing hybrid approaches that not only is focused on your department, but all kind of organizational areas for helping to make sure that those connections are existing and being built upon. I certainly appreciate the strategic focus that Douglasville takes in terms of just trying to pay attention to what's going on in the community, and then through their engagement channels, building on policies and projects and those things that are going to move the community forward. All of the comments that you have presented today across all of the communities have just, I think, are going to really serve well for other local governments that are looking for solutions to the problem. And it doesn't ever take away from those personal touches that that you're all doing, and just trying to make sure that you're seeing people to the extent that you can actually connect with people in real life. So thank you for all of your perspectives and your comments during the panel today. I'm going to just kind of summarize the conversation with a couple of points. I'm going to follow up this panel conversation with an email to each of you, and I'll provide you a connection and information about each of the panelists. We have a couple of minutes, although I know we're going to lose the chief here. Maybe we've already lost the chief. I know she had a commitment at the top of the hour. So what I'll do, Ryan, is I will make sure that you have the connection for all the other panels, so that if there were any follow-up questions that you wanted to ask, you'll have that opportunity. We have these panels every week. Next week, we're going to involve the communities of Crystal River, Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, and Sierra Madre, California. And again, the intent is just to share perspectives and help communities learn how to engage with their residents during these times when everything is so disrupted. So with that, Ryan, thank you for spending time today with us, and really value your perspectives, and just appreciate your involvement in the work that you're doing in the community. Good luck with the Summer Foundation. I really applaud you for those efforts, and look forward to just keeping in touch down the road.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate the invite and the opportunity to share.
Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.